The message came on a Tuesday morning. Every screen on Earth displayed the same image, a massive silver ship floating above the clouds. The aliens had finally arrived. Park Do-hyun was eating breakfast when his phone rang. He was 62 years old, retired from the army after 30 years of service. He had fought in 3 wars and lost count of how many battles. Now he spent his days gardening and reading old books. But the government had other plans for him. "We need you to speak for Earth," the defense minister said. "You are the best we have." Do-hyun looked at his half-eaten rice and sighed. "I am a soldier, not a diplomat. That is exactly why we need you. These aliens might not be friendly. We need someone who can read danger." 3 days later, Do-hyun stood in a shuttle rising toward the alien station. He wore a simple black suit instead of his military uniform. His advisors thought it would make him look peaceful. Do-hyun thought it made him look like he was attending a funeral. Perhaps he was. The station was called Concordance Prime. It was larger than any city Do-hyun had ever seen. Towers of glass and metal stretched in every direction. Ships of all shapes moved through the darkness like fish in a deep ocean. Do-hyun counted at least 50 different designs. 50 different species, all gathered in one place. A tall creature met him at the docking port. It had skin like blue crystal and eyes that glowed with soft white light. It moved gracefully, almost floating across the floor. "I am Thalox," the creature said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes. "High Speaker of the Velith and leader of the Galactic Assembly. Welcome, human." Do-hyun bowed slightly. "Thank you for receiving us. I am Park Do-hyun, representative of Earth." Thalox studied him with those glowing eyes. "You are old for your species. And you carry scars. You have been in conflicts. I have served my people in difficult times." "How primitive," Thalox said. The words were not angry, just dismissive, like an adult speaking about a child's drawing. "You will find that the Assembly has moved beyond such barbarism. We have not had war in 800 of your years." Do-hyun said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence was often the best response to insults. The meeting chamber was enormous. Hundreds of aliens sat in floating chairs arranged in a great circle. Do-hyun saw creatures of every shape. Some with scales, some with fur, some with bodies like living water. They all watched him with curiosity. A few watched with something like pity. Thalox took the central position and raised one crystal in hand. The room fell silent. "The Galactic Assembly recognizes the species called humanity," Thalox announced. "They have achieved basic space travel and discovered our existence. As is tradition, we offer them membership in our community." A screen appeared in the air, showing a document written in dozens of languages. Do-hyun read the Korean version carefully. His face remained calm, but his heart grew cold with each line. The Integration Treaty. It sounded friendly. It promised protection, technology, and guidance. But hidden in the careful words was something ugly. Humanity would surrender all weapons. Velith advisors would control Earth's governments. Human workers would be sent to mining colonies across the galaxy. In exchange, humans would receive permission to exist. Do-hyun had seen this before. Not from aliens, but from empires throughout human history. This was not a treaty. It was a surrender document. He looked around the room at the other species. The insect-like Kath sat perfectly still, their compound eyes empty. The fish-like Moral floated in tanks of water, never speaking. The reptilian Draxi kept their heads down, never meeting anyone's gaze. These were not members of a community. These were servants afraid of their master. "This is a generous offer," Do-hyun said slowly. "May I ask some questions?" Thalox smiled. At least, its face moved in a way that might have been a smile. "Of course. We understand that infant species often need things explained simply. The mining colonies mentioned here, What species currently works in them? The Cath are well suited for underground labor. The Moral process materials in aquatic facilities. And before they signed this treaty, did they have their own colonies? Their own ships? The room grew very quiet. A Cath in the front row shifted slightly. A Moral's tank bubbled with sudden movement. Talox's glowing eyes narrowed. They had primitive operations, yes. We improved them, I see. Do-hyun folded his hands. We will need time to consider this offer. It is a significant decision for our people. You have 30 of your days, Talox said. The kindness had left its voice. After that, we will assume you need assistance in making the correct choice. And if we decline? The chamber fell completely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Talox leaned forward. No species has ever declined. Human. I suggest you do not become the first. Do-hyun stood and bowed again, showing perfect respect. Thank you for your hospitality, High Speaker. We will give you our answer in 30 days. As he walked back to his shuttle, Do-hyun passed a young Draxi standing guard by the door. Their eyes met for just a moment. In that brief look, Do-hyun saw something he recognized from his years of war. He saw a prisoner looking at a free man. He saw hope mixed with fear. The Draxi quickly looked away. Do-hyun boarded his shuttle and watched Concordance Prime grow smaller through the window. His hands were steady. His breathing was calm. But inside, his old soldier's heart was already preparing for what he knew was coming. The aliens thought humans were naive. They thought humans were weak. They thought 800 years of peace made them invincible. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The United Nations Defense Council met in a bunker, deep beneath the Swiss Alps. 40 leaders from 40 nations sat around a long table. Their faces were grim. On the screen before them, Park Do-hyun finished his report. They mean to enslave us, Do-hyun said. Every word of friendship is a lie. I saw the truth in the eyes of the other species. They were prisoners pretending to be free. General Yoon Tae-woo stood at the back of the room. He was 70 years old with white hair and a face carved by decades of war. He had commanded troops on 3 continents and never lost a battle. Now he commanded Earth's Planetary Defense Force, a secret organization created when the first alien signals were detected 10 years ago. Tell us about their military, Yoon said. Impressive ships. Advanced weapons. But something felt wrong. Do-hyun paused, searching for the right words. They moved like people who had never been punched. Confident because they had never been tested. A woman stepped forward. Dr. Shin Yoonji was small and quiet, with glasses that seemed too large for her face. She led the team studying alien communications. I have been analyzing Velith transmissions for 3 months, she said. General Yoon is correct. Their military has not fought a real battle in over 800 years. They conquer through fear and economics, not combat. When they encounter resistance, they simply wait until the other side starves or surrenders. So they are bullies, said the Russian representative. Strong against the weak, untested against equals. They have never met equals, Yoonji replied. Every species they encountered was either primitive or peaceful. None of them had our history. General Yoon walked to the front of the room. His boots echoed in the silence. Humanity has been fighting wars since we climbed down from trees, he said. We have 10,000 years of combat experience written into our blood. We have soldiers who have trained their entire lives for battles that never came. We have veterans who dream of old wars every night. He looked around the room. The Velith think they are warriors because they have big ships. They are wrong. They are administrators with weapons they have forgotten how to use. The American representative raised his hand. What do you propose? We decline the treaty. We prepare for war. And we do it quietly. Yoon pressed a button, and a list of names appeared on the screen. Thousands of names. These are retired military personnel from every nation. Special forces, fighter pilots, snipers, tank commanders, intelligence officers. All of them are between 40 and 70 years old. All of them thought their fighting days were over. You want to recall them? The Chinese representative asked. I want to give them a choice. One more mission. The most important mission any human has ever faced. The vote was unanimous. That night, encrypted messages went out across the globe. In a small apartment in Seoul, Captain Baek Ji-young was grading physics homework when her old military phone buzzed. She had not touched it in 5 years. She kept it charged out of habit, the way old soldiers keep their boots polished long after they leave the service. The message was simple. Earth needs you. Report to coordinates. Tell no one. Ji-young was 51 years old. She had been one of the best fighter pilots in the Korean Air Force. She had shot down enemy aircraft in 2 conflicts and trained hundreds of young pilots. When she retired, she thought she would never fly in combat again. She looked at the stack of homework on her desk. Tomorrow, her students would wonder where their teacher had gone. She wrote a note saying she had a family emergency. It was not entirely a lie. Across the city, another message reached Han Myung. She was 53, a grandmother of 2, with gray hair and a warm smile. Her neighbors knew her as a kind woman who grew vegetables in her garden and made soup for sick children. They did not know about the 20 years she had spent in special operations. They did not know about the missions that were still classified. They did not know about the medal hidden in her closet, given to her by 3 different presidents. Myung read the message twice. Then she went to her bedroom and opened a locked box beneath her bed. Inside was her old combat knife, wrapped in cloth. She held it in her hands, feeling its familiar weight. One more time, she whispered. Similar scenes played out around the world. Old soldiers put down their gardening tools. Retired pilots stepped away from their fishing boats. Former Special Forces operators hugged their grandchildren and made excuses about business trips. They gathered at secret bases in mountains and deserts. They were given new weapons and new intelligence about the enemy. They studied Velith biology, learning where the crystalline creatures were weak. They practiced tactics designed by Dr. Yoonji's team. Strategies meant to exploit an enemy that had never faced. Human cunning. General Yoon addressed them on the final night before the deadline. They think we are children, he said. They think we will bow and serve. They do not understand what we are. He looked at the faces before him, lined with age but hard with experience. We are the generation that survived. We are the ones who fought and bled and came home. We thought our wars were over. We were wrong. One more war awaits us. The last war. The one that decides if humanity lives free or dies as slaves. The veterans did not cheer. They did not shout. They simply nodded, the way soldiers do when they understand what is being asked. On day 31, the Velith fleet arrived. High Speaker Thalox sent his final message. Your time has ended, humans. Surrender now, or face correction. Earth sent no reply. The invasion began. 12 Velith warships hung in the sky like metal gods. Each one was 5 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could turn cities to glass. High Speaker Thalox watched from the command deck of his flagship, waiting for the humans to beg. Land the ground forces, he ordered. Begin processing the population of 3 major cities. Seoul, Sao Paulo, and Cairo. Let them see what happens to those who resist. 20,000 Velith soldiers descended in silver dropships. They wore armor made of hardened crystal, carrying weapons that fired bolts of compressed energy. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They had never lost in Seoul. They landed in the financial district, their boots crushing glass and stone. The streets were empty. The buildings were dark. The Velith commander found this strange but not alarming. The primitive humans were hiding, he assumed. It would be found. Spread out. He ordered. Search every building. Bring all humans to the collection point. His soldiers moved in perfect formation, just as they had trained. They entered buildings through doors and windows, their weapons ready. They found nothing. Empty offices, cold kitchens, beds that had not been slept in. The commander frowned. Where were the humans? The answer came from above. Han Myong watched from a rooftop 3 blocks away. She lay flat against the concrete, invisible in her camouflage suit. Around her, 40 veterans waited in silence. They were armed with weapons designed specifically for this moment. High-powered rifles loaded with ammunition that could crack Velith crystal. Wait, Myong whispered into her radio. Let them spread out. Let them feel safe. The Velith soldiers moved deeper into the city. They broke into groups of 5 and 10, searching street by street. Their formation stretched thin. Their confidence grew. Now, Myong said, the city exploded. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Veterans fired from rooftops, from windows, from manholes in the street. The first wave of shots was aimed at Velith officers, the ones with colored markings on their armor. Without their leaders, the soldiers froze. Myong dropped 2 aliens with 2 shots. The third tried to raise his weapon, but a younger veteran named Ko Sunwoo put a bullet through the weak point at his elbow. The alien screamed and dropped. Move to position 2, Myong ordered. They will call for air support. Be gone before it arrives. Her team vanished like ghosts, slipping through alleys and underground tunnels prepared months in advance. By the time Velith reinforcements reached the ambush site, they found only bodies. Across the city, similar scenes played out. Lieutenant Choi Namjul had spent 2 weeks studying Velith communications. He understood their encryption, their frequencies, their protocols. Now he sat in a basement surrounded by equipment, jamming every signal the aliens sent. They are calling their ships, he reported. The ships are not answering. High Speaker Thalax was experiencing something unfamiliar. Confusion. His ground forces were dying, and he could not reach them. His sensors showed energy readings scattered across all 3 cities, but they made no sense. The humans seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. What is happening? He demanded. His tactical officer's crystal face flickered with distress. We are not certain, High Speaker. The primitives appear to be using decentralized combat tactics. Small groups attacking and retreating. We cannot predict their movements. Then bomb the cities from orbit. Destroy everything. High Speaker, our soldiers are still. They are already dead, Thelok said coldly. Burn the cities. But the order never reached the weapon systems. In Snow Paulo, a team of Brazilian and Argentine veterans had infiltrated a crashed dropship. Inside, they found a Velith communications relay. Instead of destroying it, they captured it. Now they were feeding false orders to the fleet, telling them that the ground forces were winning, that no bombardment was needed. In Cairo, Egyptian special forces had surrounded the Velith landing zone. They did not attack. They waited. When the confused aliens tried to retreat to their ships, they found every escape route blocked. The Egyptians offered them a choice: surrender or die. To the shock of everyone, including the veterans, 300 Velith soldiers chose to surrender. They had never been given that option before. As dawn broke over Seoul, Myong walked through the silent streets. Her team had lost 2 people, a former Navy sniper from Japan and a retired sergeant from Australia. She would mourn them later. Right now, she had work to do. A young Velith soldier lay wounded against a wall. His crystal armor was cracked, and pale blue liquid leaked from his side. He looked up at Myong with eyes full of terror. "Please," he said. His voice was soft, almost childlike. "Please do not kill me." Myong knelt beside him. She had killed many enemies in her life. She had never enjoyed it. "What is your name?" she asked. The alien blinked. No human had ever asked him that. "Velik. My name is Velik. Velik." Myong pulled out a medical kit. "I am going to stop your bleeding. Then you are going to answer some questions. Do you understand? You will not kill me? Only if you try to hurt my people." She began working on his wound. "We are not like the Velith Velik. We do not kill those who cannot fight back." The young soldier stared at her with confusion. In 800 years of Velith history, no conquered species had ever shown mercy. They had been taught that other races were animals, incapable of honor or compassion. They've been taught lies. Within 6 hours, all 3 landing forces had been destroyed or captured. 12,000 Velith soldiers lay dead. 8,000 were prisoners. Not a single human city had been damaged by orbital bombardment. High Speaker Thalox stared at the reports in disbelief. This was impossible. This could not be happening. These were primitives. These were infants. For the first time in his long life, Thalox felt something cold and unfamiliar creeping into his heart. Fear. High Speaker Thalox's hands trembled as he read the casualty reports. 20,000 soldiers. The finest warriors the Velith had produced in generations. Gone in a single night, destroyed by a species that had not even reached the stars 50 years ago. "Destroy them," he ordered. "Full orbital bombardment. Turn their cities to ash." His weapons officer hesitated. "High Speaker, our weapons are locked. The authorization codes are not responding." "What?" "Someone has accessed our command systems. The codes have been changed." Thalox spun toward his communications officer. "Contact the fleet. All ships fire immediately." I cannot reach them, High Speaker. Our signals are being blocked." Deep beneath Earth's surface, General Yun Taiwu watched the enemy fleet on his screens. Beside him, Dr. Shin Yunji was speaking rapidly into a microphone, coordinating the next phase of the operation. "Their communications are isolated," she reported. "Each ship thinks the others have already begun attacking. They are waiting for confirmation that will never come." "How long can we hold them?" Yoon asked. "Hours, not days. Eventually, they will realize something is wrong and restart their systems." Yoon nodded. "Then we must finish this before they do." Launch the counterattack. Across the globe, hidden bases opened their doors. Modified missiles rose into the sky, but they did not carry explosives. Dr. Yunji's team had spent months studying Velith biology. They discovered that the crystalline aliens relied on weak telepathic signals to communicate with each other, a kind of mental radio that connected every soldier to every other soldier. The missiles carried weapons designed to disrupt those signals. Not to kill, but to confuse. The first warhead detonated near Thalox's flagship. A wave of electromagnetic energy washed over the ship. Every Velith on board fell to their knees, clutching their heads. The mental voice that had always whispered in their minds, connecting them to their brothers and sisters, was suddenly gone. They were alone, Thalox screamed. It was not a sound of pain, but of emptiness. For the first time in his 300 years of life, he could not feel his people. He was isolated. He was nothing. While the Velith fleet struggled with this new silence, Captain Beek Ji-Yong was climbing into her fighter. It was not a beautiful machine. It was ugly and practical, built for one purpose: to kill alien ships. "All wings report," she said into her radio. Voices answered from around the world. American pilots, Russian pilots, Chinese pilots, Indian pilots. Old enemies who had trained to kill each other now flying side by side. "Wing 2 ready. Wing 3 ready. Wing 4 standing by. Jiang smiled. She was 51 years old, and her bones ached when the weather changed. But her hands were steady, and her eyes were sharp. All wings ascend. Target the disabled vessels first. Show them what humans can do. 60 fighters rose through the atmosphere. They were slower than Velith ships and less advanced. But they were flown by pilots with thousands of hours of combat experience. Pilots who had learned to survive in battles where one mistake meant death. The Velith defensive systems activated automatically, filling the sky with energy bolts. The computer targeting was precise and deadly. Any normal attack would have been destroyed in seconds. But human pilots were not normal. Ji Young threw her fighter into a spiral that her instructors had told her was impossible. Energy bolts passed centimeters from her wings. She felt the heat through her cockpit glass. She did not slow down. They are aiming where we should be, she reported. Not where we are. Their computers cannot predict us. Confirmed, said a Russian pilot named Petrov. He was 63 years old and had flown missions over 3 continents. They assume we will fly in straight lines. They think we are machines. Show them we are not. The human fighters danced through the Velith defenses like leaves in a storm. Their movements made no logical sense, followed no predictable pattern. The alien computers calculated probabilities and fired at empty space. Jiang lined up her first shot. The Velith ship's shield generator glowed blue on her targeting screen. "Goodbye," she whispered, and pressed the trigger. The missile was not large, but it carried a payload designed by Dr. Yunji's team. It pierced the shield at exactly the frequency the Velith used for their telepathic communications. The generator exploded, and the ship went dark. Within 2 hours, 8 of 12 Velith warships were disabled or destroyed. The remaining 4, finally breaking through the communication jamming, attempted to retreat. One was caught by a second wave of human fighters and torn apart. 2 managed to reach hyperspace and fled. The last one, Thalox's flagship, tried to jump, but found its engines crippled by precision strikes. General Yoon watched as the flagship drifted, powerless in Earth's orbit. "Do we destroy it?" asked one of his officers. "No," Yoon shook his head. "We need them alive. We need witnesses." Boarding teams ascended and captured Velith dropships. They were led by veterans from a dozen nations, soldiers who had trained for close combat their entire lives. The fighting inside the flagship was brief and brutal. The Velith, still disoriented from the telepathic disruption, could barely hold their weapons docked within an hour. High Speaker Thalox stood in chains before Ambassador Park Do-Yun. The great leader of the Galactic Assembly, the conqueror of 100 worlds, had been captured by creatures he had called primitives. "You do not understand what you have done," Thalox hissed. "The Assembly will send more ships. Thousands of ships. You cannot defeat us all." Dunn looked at the alien with calm eyes. "Perhaps. But today, we defeated you. And the galaxy is watching." On Concordance Prime, millions of aliens gathered around screens showing the battle. They saw Velith ships burning. They saw Velith soldiers surrendering. They saw something that had not happened in 800 years. They saw the Masters fall. BackHFY were the first to begin whispering among themselves. Then the Moral. Then the Draxi. Species who had lived in fear for generations felt something new stirring in their hearts. If the humans could do it, perhaps they could too. The news spread across the galaxy like fire in dry grass. On 1,000 worlds and 1,000 languages, the same story was told. The humans had won, not just won. They had captured the High Speaker himself. They had destroyed his fleet with primitive ships flown by aging pilots. They had beaten the greatest military power in the galaxy using nothing but courage and experience. But that was not the part that shocked the Galaxy most. The images came from Earth 3 days after the battle. Human journalists had filmed the Velith prisoners in their camps. The aliens were not starving. They were not tortured. They were not executed. They sat in clean rooms, eating food provided by their captors, receiving medical care for their wounds. A Keth journalist named Tikri traveled to Earth to see this impossible thing for himself. He walked through the prisoner camp with his recording device, expecting to find horrors hidden behind the kind images. He found something else entirely. A wounded Velith soldier sat in a hospital bed, his crystal arm wrapped in bandages. A human nurse, an old woman with gray hair, was checking his wounds. "Does this hurt?" she asked gently. The Velith shook his head. His eyes were confused, lost. "You are healing well," the nurse said. "Another week, and you will be walking again." "Why?" the soldier whispered. "Why do you help me?" "I came to enslave your people." The nurse smiled. It was a tired smile, the smile of someone who had seen too much war. "Because you are hurt, and I am a healer. That is what healers do." Tikri recorded everything. He interviewed prisoners who spoke of being given blankets when they were cold, food when they were hungry, company when they were lonely. He spoke to guards who treated their captives with firm respect, but never cruelty. He could not understand it. Neither could the galaxy. The Velith had ruled through fear for 8 centuries. They broke species by showing them what happened to those who resisted: death, torture, extinction. But the humans had won, and instead of becoming monsters, they had shown mercy. The message was clear. We are not like them. 6 months passed. The Galactic Assembly fractured. Without the Velith fleet to enforce their will, the subject species began to question their masters. The Keth stopped working in the mines. The Moral refused to process materials. The Draxi began speaking openly about freedom for the first time in generations. Ambassador Part Dohyun returned to Concordance Prime. This time, he did not come alone. His shuttle landed at the same dock where he had first met High Speaker Thalox. But now, the station was different. Velith guards no longer stood at every corner. Species who had kept their heads down now walked tall, their eyes meeting Dohyun's without fear. Behind him walked the heroes of Earth, General Yun Tai-Wu, his white hair combed neat, his old uniform covered in medals. Captain Baek Ji-yong, who had destroyed 5 Velith ships and trained 100 young pilots in the months since the battle. Sergeant Han Myong, the grandmother who had led the defense of Seoul and become a legend among resistance fighters across the galaxy. And many others. Men and women from every nation on Earth, every branch of every military, every age from 40 to 80. They were not young. They were not beautiful. They looked exactly like what they were: old soldiers who had seen too much and fought too long. The assembly chamber was full, not with Velith loyalists anymore, but with representatives of species who had begun to imagine new possibilities. Dohyun stepped to the central platform. The room fell silent. "We are not here as conquerors," he said. His voice was calm, the voice of a man who had nothing to prove. "We are not here to rule you. We are here to offer what the Velith never did." He paused, looking around at the hundreds of alien faces watching him. Partnership. True partnership. Between equals. A young Draxi delegate leaned toward his colleague. "They look so ordinary," he whispered. "So old and tired." His colleague, who'd studied the battle recordings carefully, shook his head. "That is exactly the point. They are ordinary, and they defeated an empire." From a holding cell somewhere beneath the station, High Speaker Thalox watched the ceremony on a small screen. He was awaiting trial for crimes against dozens of species. His fleet was gone. His power was broken. Everything he had built over 300 years lay in ruins, and he could not understand why. The humans should have been easy. They were young, inexperienced, divided among themselves. They had none of the advantages that other species had enjoyed before they fell. But they had something else. Something Thalox had never considered. They had history. Thousands of years of war and suffering and survival. They had fought each other across every continent, in every climate, using every weapon from sharpened rocks to nuclear bombs. They had learned lessons in blood that the Velith had forgotten centuries ago. And when the enemy finally came from the stars, those old lessons came flooding back. In the assembly chamber, Sergeant Han Myong stood at attention beside her fellow veterans. Her back hurt. Her knees ached. She was 60 years old and tired to her bones. But when a young Keth approached her with wonder in his compound eyes and asked how the humans had done the impossible, she smiled. "We are not special," she said. "We are just very, very stubborn. And when someone threatens our home, we remember that we have been fighting for 10,000 years." She looked at the old soldiers around her, the gray-haired pilots and the limping infantrymen and the grandparents who had come out of retirement to save their world. "We thought our wars were over. We were happy to rest. But when you came for us, we remembered what we are." "And what is that?" the Keth asked. Meow's smile faded. Her eyes grew hard, the eyes of a soldier who had killed and bled and survived. "We are humanity," she said. "And we do not surrender. We do not break. We do not bow." She looked up at the stars, visible through the station's great windows. "We thought our fighting days were over. But we were wrong. And because we were wrong, the galaxy is free." The Keth had no words to respond. He simply bowed, a gesture of respect he had never offered to the Velith. That night, for the first time in 800 years, the galaxy went to sleep without fear. And in a small room on Concordance Prime, Ambassador Park Do-hyun sat alone, looking at a photograph of his family back on Earth, his wife, his children, his grandchildren who would grow up in a world where humanity stood among the stars. He was 62 years old. He was tired. His work was far from finished. But today, humanity was free. Today, that was enough.